Black Friday deals are finally here, and today we're going to dedicate the video to CPU deals, all the way from the low end to the high end, the best bang for your buck, and we're also going to talk about stock and availability. So let's get started. Hey guys, Tiago here. So today, let's talk about Black Friday deals as it pertains to CPUs. After your GPU, obviously the CPU is going to be the most important element in terms of getting a great gaming experience. We have many things to choose from on the market. Black Friday always brings around some really great prices. And of course, we're also going to discuss a little bit of the stock and availability issues as it pertains to the Ryzen 5000 CPUs. So let's start with the first CPU recommendation. And this is going to be the one that I feel is going to be sort of the best budget CPU that's still giving you very good performance. This is going to be the AMD Ryzen 5 3600. Now be aware that there also is a 3600X variant. Typically that one's going to be a little bit more expensive and you don't really get too much more. It's clocked maybe a little bit higher, but you can easily achieve those numbers with a few minutes in BIOS. So the 3600 will represent sort of your best bang for your buck in terms of the gaming performance. This CPU, when it came out, was certainly one of the ones to really shake things up against Intel, because for a CPU that now has been selling for between $160 to $200, it really puts up absolutely amazing gaming numbers. In fact, it gets even close to the 8700K, which was Intel's highest end 8th generation CPU for gaming. So the 3600, and of course it also comes with a cooler, so that way you're going to offset some of the costs there. Certainly still is, even with the new Ryzen 5000 CPUs out, the 3600 really doesn't have that much competition in its price bracket. It's a very efficient CPU that actually performs really well in gaming. Of course, I would advise you guys, when you're looking around for the different Black Friday deals, try to get it well under $200. The cheapest that I've seen it is maybe like $160 to $180. That's probably the sweet spot, but anything over $200, then I would really advise not to go for it, just because at this point it's going to be over a year old, and even though the performance is great, it starts to become a different value proposition the more expensive that it gets. But for under $200 and preferably closer to that like 180 to 170 level, this still remains to be a very great CPU. And if you guys are getting the CPU and the motherboard as well, just for future compatibility with Ryzen 5000, in case you decide to upgrade later on, I would try to get perhaps a 500 series motherboard, something like a B550. Of course, for a CPU like this, I don't really think you need X570. B550 will be more than enough, and you can also upgrade in the future. I say the 500 series motherboard. We know that the 400, like the B450, eventually probably will get some support for Ryzen 5000, but it's not guaranteed, and even AMD themselves said it's going to be a very selective BIOS. So it could be that whatever motherboard you buy now, a 400 series, it may not work if you plan to upgrade later. So if you want to keep that upgrade path open for your 3600 to go to something like a 5600X or higher in the future, I would certainly stay with like a B550 or something like that. You can find a lot of great motherboards in that $200 range and below. So that's certainly my recommendation if you're going for the 3600, just to give you a little bit of future upgradability. And now a lot of people will ask, how is the 3600 versus something like the 5600X? Of course, the 5600X is going to require the 500 series motherboard, B550, X570. The 5600X, first of all, it's around $299, so much more expensive than the 3600. AMD has not so far released any information on something like a 5600 without the X, which would presumably come in a lot closer to the $200 price point. But having said that, the 5600X will provide a tremendous amount of value in terms of really high-end gaming without having to buy a more expensive Ryzen CPU or even a more expensive Intel CPU that may come in at twice the price but without twice the performance. The Ryzen 5600 has many improvements in sort of the Zen 3 architecture. You're going to get the smart access memory if you pair this with one of AMD's newer GPUs, not to mention that great gains in IPC, clock speeds, lower latency. All of this means that it's getting really tremendous performance. Even if you put it up against something like a 10900K in gaming, it's going to perform extremely well even against Intel's highest end CPUs. Even in the benchmark scores, the 5600X is beating pretty much anything out there from previous generations in terms of really fast clock speeds. So of course the 5600X is going to be much faster than the 3600, but we do have a few issues here. First is the price. It is $299, so that could be as much as like $100 to $140 more than the 3600. And then the other issue here will be stock and availability. The 5600X, even though it was more widely available than some of the higher end Ryzen 5000, it's still pretty much always out of stock, so you do have to watch different places. Micro Center is always a great place to get CPUs. You can check on Amazon or Newegg. They have been coming in stock more frequently, and hopefully now within the next week and few weeks before the holiday season really kicks into gear, these should be in stock a lot more than something like a 5950X. So, but keep that in mind. That is a potential issue of not really finding it in stock. That's why I mentioned it after the 3600. And of course, if you can't find stock of some of these newer Ryzen 5000 CPUs, there still is a lot of Ryzen 3000 CPUs that will be sold for a fairly good price. For example, now this isn't going to be available everywhere, but I did see the Ryzen 3800 XT on sale for $299 at Micro Center. Now, this represents a pretty incredible deal for this CPU. Last generation, this was going to be pretty much one of the best gaming CPUs from Ryzen. Of course, now with Ryzen 5000, you are going to be paying more, but you are also getting more gaming performance, but the availability certainly is an issue. And while a 3800 XT isn't the newest and greatest, it's certainly going to perform very well. And I think at $299, you really can't go wrong for something like this. Of course, if you step up from the 5600X to something like the 5800X, you're talking about $450 for a similar CPU as the 3800 XT. Of course, that one is still going to perform better in gaming. It's going to have much better benchmark numbers, but you are paying about $150 more. So you do have to keep in mind when you're comparing sort of the 3000 series generation with the newer 5000 Ryzen. And basically, you may even see the 3900X and the 3950X at considerable discounts since it's going to be the previous generation. There's nothing wrong with getting them. They're still very high performing CPUs. They're very efficient. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that they're not going to have the highest IPC. They have a little more latency. Basically, that means less gaming performance than something from Intel's higher end 10th generation, and of course, less than Ryzen's 5000 series CPU. But in general, they're still very high performing CPUs, and of course, you're going to be paying considerably a lower price than if you would with one of the newer CPUs, so you have to expect a little bit of that performance decrease. For AMD Ryzen, if you happen to find them in stock and you do have a much bigger budget, I personally really like the 5950X. I mean, it's one of the best CPUs that we've ever seen in history pretty much. If you want to be a content creator at the same time have a really fast gaming machine, this CPU presents pretty much the best value of everything in the market. Compare it to something like Threadripper. Of course, Threadripper will have better multi-core performance, so if you have a specific use case that takes advantage of that, of course, it's better to do that and get a second computer for gaming or something like that. But if the Ryzen 5950X or even the 5900X fulfills most of your CPU usage that you're going to have in terms of your content creation, it's going to leave a lot on the table for gaming. You're going to have really fast gaming performance in the same chip, therefore really making it, I think, a much better value than even some of the more powerful Threadripper CPUs, where if you don't have a specific use case for them, their gaming performance is certainly going to be a lot less than something like a 5950X. Intel certainly still has a few really good deals, especially since they're selling a little bit less. I've seen some deals, for example, the 9900K, which is a fantastic CPU for some content creation and of course for gaming. I've seen it on sale as low as $299. Now, of course, the 10900K is still going to be a little bit expensive, but recently I saw a special for the 10850K, which is basically almost as good as the 10900K. I even tested one previously, sort of the benchmark numbers were very, very close, but it's going to come in at around $399, so that certainly represents a very good price for a very high performing 10-core 20-thread CPU. If you're comparing this against one of the older AMD CPUs, like maybe a 3800X, I would certainly choose this over that in terms of the gaming performance. Of course, I still think the 5600X is probably a better value if you can find it, rather than the 10850K, but if you're doing strictly gaming and you really can't find any of the new AMD CPUs, I think some of these Intel chips, even the 10700K, these will give you really great performance. They're not as efficient as AMD, but in general, they still have some great high boost clocks, IPC, everything that Intel has been known for from the previous years. So you're still going to get really great gaming performance and reducing your bottlenecking in different types of games that you may be playing, especially if you have one of the newer generation GPUs like the NVIDIA 3000 series or something from AMD's 6000 RX series. And of course, you may be able to find Z490 and especially Z390 motherboards a little bit cheaper. They've been on the market more and a lot more people are buying AMD. Just keep in mind that your upgrade path is going to be a little bit more limited. But then once again, Ryzen 5000 probably will be the last upgrade path on the current platform before we get something completely new. So in that case, it's a little bit of a wash. So I would buy the best CPU that you can afford now, that you find at the best price, with a platform that you're pretty comfortable. Of course, your first choice, if you can find something from the newer AMD Ryzen 5000, that's going to give you more future proofing. These are really geared towards gaming. They're even great content creation CPUs. But if you can't find them, there still are a lot of great options on the market. Like we mentioned, the different ones from AMD, as well as even some of these Intel chips are definitely being discounted more than they were in the past, and they still make a pretty great, compelling gaming and workstation CPU. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Good luck out there searching for all these deals. Let us know what you find down below. Remember to subscribe, hit that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.